Good evening. Hello everyone. I'm here to speak on the topic of drug addiction and incarceration, as that was the topic of choice for my opponent, Daniel. His main claim was that drug addiction treatments such as rehabs are more of an effective way to combat drug and drug-related crimes and incarceration. First of all, Daniel did a good job explaining why rehabilitation programs are a necessity for drug abusers, but he did not highlight the point that drug offenders are not sent to jail. So basically, that he's making a claim that drug offenders are being sent to jail and they're not being sent to rehabilitation programs. But I'm here today to argue the fact that his main claim is not a controversy because they indeed do send drug offenders to rehabilitation programs. So I have a quote from Sarah Jones, who writes for Politics USA. The Obama administration estimates that we are now sending about 120,000 people who are drug abusers to treatment instead of jail. That's a lot of drug users who would have been languishing in jail, where they don't get help and often don't belong. This means that many of the drug abusers are not being sent to jail, but are sent to rehabs, which is more beneficial towards them. That is basically what Daniel was arguing, but there is literally no controversy over that. Now, however, the next point. Daniel did not state he did not state that fact, and only made it clear that yes, sending drug abusers to jail is a waste of taxpayers' money. We can all agree that it is a waste of our money, or taxpayers' money. Even the president's administration acknowledges that, so there's no real controversy over that. I would like to add the fact there are already rehabilitation programs within prisons across America. For example, the CDC, or the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, is what it basically stands for. Rehab programs within jail systems. I will now read their mission statement straight from their website. Our top priority is to provide rehabilitative programming and skills to inmates and parolees in an effort to reduce their likelihood to re-offending by the time they return to their homes and communities. This means that although Daniel is arguing that rehab programs are a better alternative, which already are being offered to drug abusers anyway, for the first or second offense, jails already have a system within their own system, within the system, which is rehab. Now, that does not mean that taxpayers aren't going to pay the same amount as they would be paying if drug offenders were sent to rehab anyway or alone. No, but the point is that there are still rehabilitation programs within the system to help out people who are less unfortunate and are sentenced to go to jail, who are drug abusers. In conclusion, I see no distress or controversy at all over Daniel's claims about rehab programs being a better alternative than incarceration, because they truly are a better alternative than incarceration. And drug abusers are being sent to them regardless, as well as also having the access to rehab programs within the own system or incarceration. Therefore, I see no need to argue or refute or retaliate, whatever you want to call it, to this topic, because I see that there is no controversy at all. And basically concludes why there's no controversy. Thank you.
Well, didn't you already give me one?
Yeah.
Well, then I don't need one.
Okay.
One's enough. Okay, well, the proposition, the secondary points are labeled pretty clearly. You basically are arguing that there's not a controversy because everybody accepts that drug rehabilitation is a good thing. I think that part of the argument is fine. The question then becomes, are we using drug rehabilitation instead of prison? And on the first point, you basically say that we've done that for 120,000 people. And that's the quote that you have from the Obama administration that's talking about those kinds of things. And then you say we could all pretty much agree that sending people to jail is worthless, except, of course, that people go to jail for drug use, not just because of drug use, but because they are engaged in other behaviors that are associated with with that kind of use. So, for instance, nobody wants to send a heroin addict to prison because they're a heroin addict, but they do want to send them to prison when they have been mugging people, burglarizing, stealing, and assaulting people in order to get the money to buy the heroin. That's the issue that I think we're looking at. And you kind of leave that whole element of the equation out of the argument. The fact that drug rehabilitation is a good thing, nobody disputes that. The question is, do we need prison also? And I don't think you do much of a job to present a justification for that. Your whole second point attempts to address the issue by saying, but they get rehabilitation in prison also. So in essence, you're acknowledging that they're going to be going to prison, which would be something that the advocate said was not necessary. And I think you need to have that argument that says it is necessary in some situations. Then the second thing that you're doing on this particular point, you've quoted what the prisons are for, which is rehabilitation, but it doesn't necessarily specify drug rehab. And I think that that's where there's a lack of information on this particular point. I think there are probably drug rehab programs in the prisons. You need to cite them. I think that there's good evidence, especially in the state of California, that people get diverted into, when they have minor drug offenses, that they get diverted into rehab as opposed to being sent to prison. And even when they do go to prison, that it's likely that if they had a drug problem when they were sent to prison, that they can get access to drug rehabilitation in prison. But your evidence really just talks about what's the purpose of prison. It's to rehabilitate people, and you're kind of equivocating that those are the same thing, and I don't think that that's a legitimate interpretation of that. And then you come back to the argument that basically says, so there's not really any controversy on this point. I don't think there's any controversy that drug rehabilitation is a good thing. There is some controversy about whether or not prison is required as part of that process, and whether or not that would provide people adequate coverage, and that's where I think you need to develop your argument more. All right, thank you.